Okay, so we're going to talk about the anthologies of Midrash. Like, what are the main anthologies of Midrash that we have in the traditional sense, and in the more academic and critical editions. And I'm going to concentrate on the Agadah literature and not on the Halakha literature. They're two completely different worlds. So when we talk about Agadah, there are several very famous compilations that people are familiar with. One of them is the Midrash Rabbi, right? Mm-hmm. The Midrash Rabbi is, but literally mean the great Midrash. Rabba is Rav, great. So it's the great Midrash, and we have it on the 5 books of Torah, Torah, and the 5 scrolls. So altogether 10 volumes, but they're not similar, and they don't come from the same period. As a matter of fact, people you could say that Bereshit and Vayikra Rabbah, and you could are the earliest. Shemot comes later, and Bamidbar Dvarim, a little bit. It so happens are the latest of the Midrashim, where this could be dated to the 2nd century, and this to between the 7th and 10th century. Some, not all of it. I mean, it's all people add it, and Shemot is somewhere in between. This is constantly reevaluated because you have segments. Some added more with more detail, some less. But these are the Rabbah Midrashim. The Megillot also, Shir HaShirim, comes also from a later period. Shir HaShirim, it's Gaonic, and this is song come from a later period. Echa is a classic Midrash that of the Book of Lamentations, that is very we could say meticulously edited, more than others, but then there were additions later on. And then we have Kohelet, Ruth, and Esther that are somewhere in between in terms of the timeline.
So meaning Echa was in the 2nd century?
Echa is the 2nd century, Shir HaShirim is the latest, and the others are in between. They are influenced with the literature from the literature of Talmud. The problem with all this body of literature, like I said, first of all, you see that they are all called Midrash Rabbah. So people think that it's one unit, but it's not. It's really 10 separate units, but even those 10 units are broken to many subunits because of the sort of non-official nature of these works. It's not like Talmud or Mishnah that people see as binding, so they treat it with more reverence. Those things, people edited, even with the Mishnah, and definitely with the Talmud, there's a debate if we have something called the text, the original text that everybody copied from, and then was altered, or that there were many parallel texts that eventually were merged, or one of them disappeared. But I'm not getting into this question, because that really, in order to unearth that, you'll have to look at manuscripts and find different versions. And not always you could find a version of the same Agadah in different places, but you will find it in the different bodies of rabbinic literature. When you could find an Agadah in Midrash Rabbah, in the Talmud, and maybe in different versions in the Babylonian and in the Yerushalayim Talmud and the Tosefta. So the best method not the best, but maybe the first step of analysis of when you. So we're talking about the different bodies of compilations of Midrashic literature. So I was saying that when we approach a text and we want to analyze it, the best way is to start with comparative criticism. So any version that you have of the text, you put side by side, and wherever you find a deviation, you know that there is some problem here. So what do you do with a text like the Tanakh that is usually very accurate, and we have it in Hebrew? you look at translations. If this is what or you look at the commentaries. So if you put 2 or 3 good translations side by side, let's say you put the JPS and Fox and the Anchor Bible, and then you know what, throw in ArtScroll just for fun. Not that it's not good; it's good for certain purposes, but definitely you should not use it as an authoritative text. My professor in NYU, Lawrence Schiffman, said that that the Jewish world should have announced a fast day, the day that the ArtScroll Chumash was published.
Really?
Why?
Why? Because there are major deviations from the
translation.
Yes, it's commentary. If they would have dubbed it ArtScroll commentary, it's okay. But
They purport to be a translation.
yeah, but translation is a problem. Anyway, I don't say that I agree with him. I'm just saying what he said. But in any case, to study a text it's the comparative method is what should be done, because I've seen people writing papers and theses on a certain segment of the Talmud or the Midrash and everything, and meanwhile there's a completely different versions according to which this whole theory doesn't exist. So sometimes it knocks this theory altogether. Sometimes you could say the author took the version of, let's say, the Babylonian Talmud and altered it, and that's his or her agenda, which is fine, as long as you know that we have this these parameters around the text. So in the Midrash Rabbah, because of sort of like its more fluid nature, people kept adding and taking away, and it's not easy to track those changes. Sometimes you could do it with the manuscript. More commonly you do it with the critical tools. So you look at the language, you look at the anachronisms, you look at the language doesn't flow normally. Something is missing. Someone altered it because the text was offensive, usually to Christians in medieval Europe. But there were other cases where texts were expunged from Midrash because they were not congruent with the majority opinion. That happened more in Midrash Halakha, by the way. One very interesting text that sort of disappeared from the Midrash Halakha was that women could be witnesses. That goes back to the 2nd or 3rd century. Professor Kahana, who was an expert in Midrash Halakha, found that text. So we have sort of proof that there were different trends, different opinions, but they were expunged out of the official editions.
That women could be witnesses
On everything, yeah. And
everything?
Yeah.
Yeah, like Ketubot and like
from the 3rd century?
Ketubot, yeah, from tonight to Mishnaic times. Ketubot are, the least of our concerns. What is mind-boggling about the fact that a woman cannot be is, imagine the two women witnessed a murder, right? So they come to Bedin and they say, "We're sorry, you can't testify." That's terrible. So
3rd century.
yeah.
Only because I'm doing for my thesis the development of
Yeah.
women in the synagogue. So I didn't know.
Yeah, that
Maybe
would
we'll
be
talk at a
interesting.
different time.
Yes.
Okay.
But that's a side note on Midrash Halakha. So in general, Midrash Rabbah is an important compilation. The structure of Midrash Rabbah is pretty much, and especially the early Midrashim, pretty much follows the structure of the Chumash. A word and commentary. In the earlier the Midrash is, and that's how you could also date it, the more it's built like the examples that we've seen from Midrash Halakha. A couple of words from the text and commentary. And the commentary is both dictionary, just explaining the meaning of the word, or it translates it to other languages, to Aramaic or to Greek, and sometimes expands the narrative. Sometimes you'll find Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nehemiah disputing on what exactly it means. But when you move on to Bamidbar, Dvarim, then you'll see that you have sometimes long-winded stories on one word of the text. So it's more like a sermon that is attached to a word of the Torah rather than small units. So this is one of the indicators that tells us what is early, what is late.
So is that early?
Yeah, early is small units.
Okay.
Just like the Midrash Halacha, because this is how people would sit in front of the rabbi. Remember the pasuk that we used, pasukot, in a structure. Teshvu, you will sit, including sleeping. Shivat, 7 days, including night. Right, word by word. You say the word and you explain. No, that was the earliest form of learning.
Takes smaller units.
It takes more units, and then because first you have to crack up the meaning. What does it mean? How do you translate it? What if you have a word which is ambiguous? So all these things you have to decipher. They also worked on, for example, if we talk about the example that we did of Avraham being circumcised or not. So you have a grain of an idea that the rabbis are using the story of the Brit Milah in order to convince people to do it in their time and age. A later generation already accepts it as a given that Avraham was reluctant to do the Brit Milah, and now will develop into a story. So it's not a sort of a dry report of he said this, he said that, but rather more in prose form. So those are the later midrashim. So Shir HaShirim is more consistent in the sense that it sees the whole scroll of the Song of Songs as a metaphor. And actually, if you want the Midrash on Shir HaShirim, go to the Art Scroll Humash, because they basically translated the whole Song of Songs as an allegory. And they say it's not a literal translation, because they cannot bring themselves to translate literally. And it follows the Midrash on Shir HaShirim. So this is one a major compilation, which is structured, like I said, it's commentary on the text, sometimes more in line with the text, and sometimes less. Yes?
Just to clarify, because the Midrash Rabbi was compiled over
1,000 years,
1,000 years, you're going to find within that same body these different examples of earlier and later explications.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And also you'll find different literary forms in terms of language. You will find, usually it starts with the flowery Hebrew that is more Bible-like. Then the next generation is the flowery Aramaic. Then you have I would call it pretentious or fake Hebrew, meaning people who try to speak the Hebrew but they don't speak it anymore. So you feel that things are missing. It's not really the biblical grammar and syntax that you're familiar with. And then the sort of what you call it pseudo-Aramaic that comes in a later period when people don't use Aramaic anymore. And the Zohar definitely falls into this category of sort of a language that was created for the book of the Zohar. So, but you could also, doesn't belong to Midrash Rabbah, but belongs to some kind of this literature that is a commentary on the Torah, but is given this authority that it comes from Tannaitic period. So that is another issue. So we have another important collection of Midrashim called Midrash Tanhuma or Yelamdenu. It's the same body of Midrashim. They have two names, either Tanhuma or Yelamdenu. Tanhuma is the name of the rabbi who allegedly is the author of all the Midrash Tanhuma. Yelamdenu means you will teach us, or please teach us. And that's because each section of the book, it's like each one is a parasha, is on one parasha of the Torah. It starts with the word Yelamdenu Rabbeinu. Will our master teach us? And this is, when you look at the Tanhuma, it seems that it's clearly something that either was meant to be written down or was meant to be delivered as a sermon, because it's the question is a setup. It's already, I know what the answer will be. So, for example, one would say, the question would be, is one allowed to run on Shabbat? Or you have to walk nicely, you have to walk, respectfully. And the answer would be, they're explaining about what does it mean, what do you show when you run? and then they will bring the story of Lavan running out to the well to welcome Jacob, and why did he do that? So it's about Parashat Vayetze, but there would not be the question that one of the congregants would ask the rabbi specifically about the parasha, but the rabbi already prepared the question, and he comes and says, "Here, let me tell you about running on Shabbat," and then he goes into this whole thing. So this is sort of the structure of the Midrash Tanhuma. It's the one question that is tied somehow into the parasha. So, for example, the congregants would ask, "Can you teach us about the Brit Milah?" And that's in Parashat Vayera, where Avraham is commanded to do the Brit Milah. There are here also manuscript. There's a critical edition that Martin Bober edited with Mekitzei Nirdamim. There was a period of many manuscripts of Midrashim, late 1800s, early 1900s. People were very excited about discovering and putting out, and a lot of work was done at the time, and now we are sort of like in the second cycle, where we will take those editions and publish them again. So you have Tanhuma and Rabbah; those are the two main compilations of Midrashim. Besides them, Tanhuma is probably Talmudic or post-Talmudic because of the language and the style. Fourth. Also, the whole idea of Yelam Denu, it's like this is part of like the Bet Midrash session. There are many other minor midrashim called Midrash Avkir, Midrash
Avkir with an Aleph or an
Aleph Bet Kaf Yud Resh, but only that's the first because that's the first word of the Midrash, Midrash Tache. When we look at the important compilations, those are the two important compilations. We have a couple of other midrashim that are worth mentioning. We already saw one of them, but I'll mention the three important midrashim that we have to look at. One of them is called the Seder Olam Rabbah, the order of the world, the great order of the world. Okay? Because there's a Seder Olam Zuta, meaning one of them is just a...
I use this for Tikkun
Uh-huh.
Shavuot,
And
to track the days. How do you get to... How did Shavuot come to celebrate
Matan Torah. And it worked for you?
Through the Omer. Yeah,
okay.
It took me a couple times.
So you're a good darshan.
Okay.
No,
it's really just mathematics.
Yeah.
You just got to go through and keep adding the numbers up.
But part of it is Midrash. So it is attributed to Abba Yosef bar Halafta, who's a Tana, who lived at the around the 1st century. What Abba Yosef bar Halafta did, he decided to go through the Tanakh and fill in the gaps for all the years that are not mentioned. For example, how many years between the births of the sons of Yaakov? How old were Shimon and Levi when they assaulted the city of Shechem? They were 13.
So is this the one that you were talking about?
According to this.
The other day that
doesn't really work, right? Because the working assumption is that everything that's written in juxtaposition happened on the same day.
I
And
can't
of
read
course,
your writing.
what?
Bar
Halafta.
Halafta. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Ha or ha?
Het. And there's a critical edition, I think it's out already, by one of my professors from Bar Ilan, Haim Ovadia. He was working on it when I was in Bar Ilan, so I think by now it's...
This is, I haven't found one in English. I had to look.
No, not in English, I think it's in Hebrew. But most of it is not Midrash. Most of it is really commentary on the text, but he's using Midrashic tools. For example, to say, like I said, that Shimon and Levi were 13 years old when they attacked Shechem, which doesn't make sense to us, right? 2 13-year-olds killing a whole city.
No, they would kill each other.
Right. And...
Says the father of 3 boys.
Oh, yeah, 2 boys, what are
Three.
3 boys. Raising Cain is the book for you. Did you read it?
No,
You should read it.
I will.
Okay. So, the problem with this, where do you take from that Shimon and Levi were 13 years old? Because the Torah says, Ish harbo, each man took his sword. When do you become a man? When you turn 13. Problem, they couldn't have been 13 both because
Different ages.
they were born in different
And
times.
they're not twins.
So maybe being past 13. So if they're past 13, how do you know it's exactly 13? Right. Besides that, the whole issue of 13 was not yet in place, and not when Shimon and Levi did that. So it's a rabbinical concept. But there are many things like that throughout Seder Olam. But the importance of Seder Olam is that it was considered an authoritative source for Jewish chronology. So people used it, especially Rashi, in his commentary on the Tanakh. And another important element, and we'll get it when we get to Rashi, is that there are certain things that you disagree with, let's say with Rashi's commentary, and you bring it up, and you will say this is midrashic material, and we don't rely on midrash, and we will say no, but this is not midrash. Seder Olam Rabbah is like the Mishnah, because it was written by a Tannaitic scholar. So that's about what we have with that. Then we have a book called another book called Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, the chapters or the teachings of Rabbi Eliezer. This is an apocrypha. I mean, he's not really the author. It's called Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkenos. It's the famous Rabbi Eliezer with whom they had a dispute over the oven. Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. This is from the Gaonic period. Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. We know because of the language, because of the it starts as a descriptive, a more expanded version of the stories of the Torah, and then it goes into teachings, morals, and ethics. The reason, one of the examples that we know that it's a later work is that we have a story in this work of Avraham going to visit his son Esau after he left and he lives in the desert. Ishmael. Yeah, Ishmael. He goes to visit Ishmael. Ishmael is in the desert, and he comes and he sees Ishmael's wife, and he asks, "Where's your husband?" And she says, "My husband went away. What do you want, old man?" She's being very rude to him, and he said, "I don't need anything. Just when your husband comes back, tell him that the wedges that hold the tent are not strong. That he has to drive them strong into the ground." Something like that. So when Ishmael comes back and she tells him that, he realizes that the old man was his father, that the unstable wedge refers to his wife, and she's not good, and he divorced her. Then Abraham comes to visit again, and this time the new wife treats him nicely. Again, his son is not home, and he says, tell him that the tent is very strong, and everything is good. It's a nice story, cute story. It sounds like coming from Bedouin folklore. The thing is that the names of the women are mentioned in some of the versions, and they're called Fatma and Aisha, which are the names of two of the of Muhammad's wives. So it's a clear reference to Islam. So the only way that the author of the Midrash could refer to Islam is if he lived after the rise of Islam. So it's about 6th, 7th century. So we know it's not Rabbi Eliezer Gadol who lived in the 1st century. But also, by the way, we've also learned one of the ways to date the midrashic material is by reference or lack of reference to historical events, right? If let's say if I read a book about the history of Europe and it fails to mention Hitler, then I know it was written before 1933. So the same way, if a book, a midrash compilation that is consistent and coherent fails to mention, for example, the cancellation of the presidency establishment in Israel, which happened around the 4th, 5th century, then I know it was written earlier to that. And if it mentions a much later event, then I know this is one way to date material. We also have Tanat Devi Eliyahu, another very interesting collection of midrashim. This is more of the ethical stories category. That stories with a message, stories with a lesson. Like the angel walks with a man, and they see someone building a house, and the angel starts laughing. He says, and then the man says, "Why are you laughing?" Because this man is going to die before the house will be completed. So you don't see what I see. Stuff like that.
Time period?
Time period is probably the Geonic period, again. But people think that since it's Tanah Eliyahu, it comes from
Eliyahu.
Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Navi. So we have, or at least Tana'itic, but it's not. So, and then we have one more, Yalkut Shimoni. This is a compilation. It's also on Torah. Actually, it's the whole Tanakh. Sorry. Yalkut Shimoni is on the whole Tanakh. And it's an anthology of like chosen midrashim. That Yalkut means a bag, or what do you call, like messages bag is Yalkut, like your basket. So it's for lelaket, to gather. So you gather stuff into your bag. So he's a melaket. He's an editor. He's not an author. Shimoni is the name of the rabbi who wrote it. His name was Rabbi Shimon, and it's not Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It's Rabbi Shimon of Frankfurt, Germany, who lived in the 12th century. That's why I remember that I said that the Midrashi compilations cover a very wide span of time. So this is one of the latest. A lot of the material that is in Yalkut Shimoni comes from the work of Rabbi Moshe Hadarshan, Moshe the commentator, or the expounder, whatever you call it, the Darshan, who lived shortly before Rashi in the 10th century, and Rashi quotes also from him, as sometimes by name, sometimes it just gets into the Rashi's commentary as if it were part of the authoritative compilation.
You said the Darshan?
Darshan, yeah. From the word Yidrosh, yes.
So there's also, and maybe this has been Rosh Hashanah, but I can't quite remember the Sifrei and Sifrei.
Yeah. So just to mention them by name, the Midrashei Halacha, the important Midrashei Halacha are called the Mechilta, Sifra, and Sifrei.
Okay. Shows me.
And there is some Agadic material in them as well. So we mentioned the Mechilta. Mechilta literally means in Aramaic tractate, and it's on the book of Exodus. It's on the book of Shemot, and only recently scholars found out that there are two different schools of thought that wrote a Mechilta. One is the school of Rabbi Akiva, and the other is the school of Rabbi Ishmael. And we'll talk later on about the role of Rabbi Akiva in the world of Agadah. So, and the problem was that over the years, people copied manuscripts and they put them together. That's one problem of the Mechilta. The other problem is that since it's a Midrash Halacha, it only originally was only applied or written, not really written, but the commentary was created only for chapter 12 and on. Because chapter Yud-Bet in Shemot is where the Torah says, "HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodashim." This is the first month of the year to bring the sacrifice, etc., etc. And since Midrash Halacha, it only refers to that. But the Midrash, the Mechilta that we have, covers also the first 12 chapters, which means we have a later addition. Someone was not happy with the fact that his book starts at chapter 12 and added commentaries from other places, from Shemot Rabbah, from the Talmud, and made them into a nice big book. That's Mechilta. Then we have a book called Sifra. which you identify the Hebrew verb root, sefer, book. So, but what is it? Sifra in Aramaic? It just says book. What? The book, right? It's the book. And why is it the book? Because this is the bulk of halachot, of legal material. Vayikra. It's on Leviticus, and this is the greatest concentration of halachot that we have is in the book of Leviticus, and you have the laws of purity, impurity, leprosy, nida, kashrut, as well as a different version of the Decalogue, Parashat Kedoshim. There, you could say that almost 95% of the halachot, or 90% of the halachot, are found in the book of Leviticus. It was so important that was the measure for a scholar. I mean, if you were able to learn the Sifra, you were a true scholar. That was sort of like the to be ordained, you had to know the Sifra. That's on the book of Vayikra. And finally, on the book, then we have so this is Sifra, and then you have Sifre, which literally means books, and they are on Bamidbar and Devarim. And that's why they call Sifrei in plural.
It's funny, Wikipedia actually gives you it.
Oh,
Yeah, Wikipedia.
of course.
Yes.
That's why I included it in the original,
Well, I don't know how reliable, Wikipedia
Wikipedia is
is.
actually pretty darn good.
Yeah, on Judaic studies, pretty good. Yeah, but I'm on Wikipedia.
That's the Wiki.
No, it's not
that is
Wikipedia. No,
I was gonna say that's like a lot.
no, I know. That's
Is that
just,
all your sources?
No, that's just my database. I just want to see the names of the of
You have all these sources on your computer?
Oh, that's USB.
Wow,
Yeah, it's
that's a lot.
yeah. Actually this is almost 30 years old. Not this one, meaning the project. And they keep adding every year more books, and they're searchable. You could copy and paste. I mean, it's all in Hebrew, but it's very, very useful. Anyway, so this is in a nutshell, we're talking about the most important compilations of Midrash. And as I mentioned in the first class, the problem is that people call it the Midrash. You realize how difficult it is to call all these different, and we didn't even mention all the little Midrashim, that they're only one chapter, they're only one topic, or they're more Kabbalistic or apocalyptic, or Safut Echalot. We didn't even touch that. So to say the Midrash says, right, is just it's just wrong. There's no such thing as the Midrash. Say there is an opinion in the Midrash, or there's a quote in not even the Midrash, in the literature of Agadah. Okay, so translations of these compilations. Like I said, you have to, if you want to look for translations, depends on what you need. If you need just something quick for a drasha, so anything will do. You could look at it online, you'll find some texts are online, and you could take it and use it. If you really want to study it in depth, you should compare a couple of translations. I think Neusner has a translation. I think Sonsino has a translation
Translation of what?
of the Midrash Rabbah.
Okay.
I think there's a
Midrash.
Sonsino,
Rabbah.
I think all the classic libraries, any synagogue that you walk into, the United States, like after the 1920s, they had like this massive, 20 volumes translation of the Midrash Rabbah.
By
I don't know. No, Neusner is much later. That's a Sonsino press, I think. I think Archol is coming now with the Midrash Rabbah translation, which like every parsha is a volume. It will take 50 volumes to finish the whole thing. It's a great deal because they could get sponsors for each book, and but most probably it's not the most reliable translation. But still, when you want to look at the text, you want to look and compare. That's fine. The rest, the Psikta, and they have JPS printed some, but still, we could look forward to better translations and better renditions of these texts. Now, let's talk about the compilations that are not Midrash, like the main compilations of Agadah. The most famous ones that are not they do not come from the traditional sources, and there are a couple of them. We'll talk about the most important. Maybe the first one, you could say that people knew clearly that's already marked the transition from what they thought was midrashic style or rabbinical style to the new. It's a new, not new age, new period. Medieval times is the Yalkut Me'am Lo'ez of Rabbi Yaakov Choli. Yalkut is an anthology, right, from the word lelaket, to gather. Me'am Lo'ez, we're familiar with these words from the Hallel, and it means from a nation which speaks a different language. In Hebrew, Lo'azit is foreign language. Any language but Hebrew is called Lo'azit. So, what is Yalkut Me'am Lo'ez? It's an anthology of Agadic material in a different language. In Lo'azit, which was Ladino, language was Ladino. It was compiled by Rabbi Yaakov. I don't think that anybody's sure how to pronounce his name, but probably like Choli in Turkey. And he did it for the people who spoke the Ladino better than the Hebrew. And he basically put everything in. It's in the order of the Tanakh, and he combined all the material that he had in front of him, whether it's Midrash Rabba or Midrash Tanhuma, and some halachic material and some folk tales, whatever was available, moral, ethical tales, things that he could teach the people. So it's very difficult to figure out. There is an apparatus at the end of his chapter that tells you the sources, but even there, not all sources are covered.
And it's in Ladino? Or is it
Original Ladino, then translated to Hebrew, then translated to English by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan under the name The Torah Anthology. And actually, he did not complete the whole anthology. Someone else finished most of it, and then I think Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan did also a couple of volumes. But this is not a source that I would tell you to use when you look for midrashic material. I think the last time I opened a Ma'am was maybe 20 years ago. And then when I was searching, I was doing a critical edition of my great-grandfather's book, and I couldn't find a source anywhere else. And sure enough, it was there. And there was no reference to the Ma'am source, meaning either it was a folk tale or his own commentary that he put there. And my great-grandfather borrowed it from him or through other sources. So this is one compilation. Much, much later, we have in the 20th century a book called Sefer HaAgadah. I think that in English it was written as the Book of Legends, or the Book of Agadah. I forgot what I have it, but
I have one. That's the Book of Legends. It's a big green volume.
Yeah.
Volume.
yeah, no, that's the Legends of the Jews.
Oh.
I forgot exactly. I think it's the Book of Agadah. I'm not sure.
So the Amazon
Bialik.
says the Book of Legends, Sefer HaAgadah, Legends from the Talmud.
Right? Is it Bialik and Rovnitsky?
Yeah.
How do you see that?
The author is Bialik.
Yes.
Okay, so Haim Bialik, who was a poet and a former yeshiva bochar, meaning he was someone who was well immersed in rabbinic and Tannaitic and biblical literature. He admitted that he wrote some of his poems were written in the biblical meter. You could see like that they reflect Isaiah or other places, and he joined Ravnitsky in creating this anthology. The interesting thing about this anthology, and this I do recommend that we use. It's a very useful tool. There's no commentary. There's some commentary in the Hebrew, and of course, when translated, you don't need the commentary. but it's thematic. It's topical. It's arranged by themes, almost like the Mishnah. He worked like that, but probably because this was he was brought up in the yeshiva. So there are major themes like the world, man, Am Yisrael, etc. And each one of them is broken into sub entries. Like if it's about man, it's the age of the different ages, the human body, human emotions, and so on. So
it's all called from the Agadah.
All called from the Agadic literature, the Midrash, and the Talmud. Yeah, and Bialik also he was so fascinated with this that he wrote his own Agadot. There's a book called Agadat Shlosha V'Arba'a, The Legend of 3 and 4. It's a play of what we did with the 4 speeches. Like he used that, and he wrote and the Legends of Shlomo HaMelech, which shows, like Carol, you mentioned how we continue with the biblical and midrashic narrative. So this is one important book. Then we have another one called Agadot HaYehudim in Hebrew, or Legends of the Jews in English. It was written by Louis
Ginsburg.
Levi in Hebrew. Levi Ginsburg. His name was Levi.
Find it enormously
Okay.
like
There.
helpful,
Yes.
easy to read or understandable.
Right. You have to understand how it's built, how it's structured, in order to use it correctly.
Okay.
What Ginsburg wanted to do, it was a professor of rabbinic studies, I think, at the JTS.
Yeah.
Brilliant man, very, very knowledgeable, and one of the giants of the school and in Judaic studies in general. And he was aware of the problem that there are many different contradicting versions to each and every stage of the biblical narrative. Right? When the brothers of Yosef come to Egypt and he presents them to the king, are they the strongest or the weakest of the brothers? Was Osnat, like I mentioned yesterday, did she give birth to the boy who eventually was adopted by Shimon, or to a girl who eventually married Yosef? So which version do you pick? You can't write all of them, right? You don't have the luxury of creating a series of science fiction stories with alternative universes and histories. You have to write one. He wanted to write one timeline. So what he did was he picked and chose which storyline to follow, which sometimes was difficult to make it consistent, but to make up for this sort of lost material, because for every opinion that he includes, that's something which was left out, he added at the end of each chapter an apparatus of references, which is much more than just where can you find this. Those little remarks of C, A, B, C, like the 3 or 4 sources, that's your work. You go and open it.
Contradictory
Yes,
stories.
you open it up and you look at it, and you can find very interesting things there. This is similar to what Lieberman did with the Tosefta. Professor Shaul Lieberman published the Tosefta, which is the compilation of the Mishnah that did not make it into the Mishnah, sort of. That's what people say. But if you look at the Tosefta, there is a short commentary there. This short commentary is like the apparatus of giving you 5-6 references to each Tosefta and highlighting the problems that we find within the text. So we mentioned Yalkut Me'am Loez, Sefer Haggadah, Agadot HaYehudim.
Do you recommend like one over all of them?
So it depends on what you want to
really
do.
Expensive. I'm
Yeah.
just looking at like crying right now. Just
Yes.
the inside.
So first of all, you should use libraries that you have. You have them all here in the library. You should use them. I would recommend to have Sefer Haggadah. If you have one that you want to get Sefer Haggadah, definitely.
Sefer Haggadah.
Yeah.
Who's that by?
Bialik.
Okay.
Okay.
You there? but it's good.
Okay, so this is so far we spoke about the different compilations, the most important compilations, and of course you have the Talmud itself. So there's a lot of Agadah that is interwoven into the Talmud. So you could either look at it at the Talmud in its context, or you could look it up in a compilation called Ben Yaakov.
Is it, right?
It sounds like the eye of Jacob, but also means the spring of Jacob, the well of Jacob. Because Ha'ain in Hebrew, when Rivka goes to draw water, she does it from the ayin. It's a nice metaphor because the spring is like an eye. An open eye in the middle of the desert that gives water. So anyway, En Yaakov, that's the name of the book. There are commentaries on the book, and what it does, it gives you all the Agadot of the Talmud in one
Neat package.
in one package, right? Without interruptions of halacha. The problem with it sometimes is that even though the commentators did that, you have to look at the Agadah in the context of the halacha, because the way the Talmud brings in Agadah is associative in many cases, and associative sometimes in a very, very simple way. Not we speak of Pesach, so let me talk about matzah. No, we have sometimes a certain rabbi who said his whole life 10 worthy quotes. There are 10 worthy statements. So once they bring one, they bring all of them. And they're completely unrelated to each other. Even though there are scholars who try to show how they all work together.
They go off on these crazy tangents, and you're just like, I don't remember what you were originally talking about.
Right. So it's really not a tangent. It's not a tangent. It's like, okay, since we're talking about David, let's put everything that David said. Yeah. And so you have to be aware of that. And it's hard to do it when you only look at the compilation.
Imagine if people wrote the way they wrote the Talmud now. It would be completely incomprehensible.
No, it would be called Facebook.
Facebook.
It'll be Facebook. You make a comment or Reddit, or stuff like that. This is
people posting everywhere.
Just people post. People just said, "Oh, yeah, this is how it worked."
Everything.
Yeah, it was really a reflection of the oral tradition and the. I don't know if the name of this app a while ago was called the Tree of Knowledge or Brain Tree or something like that. I started working with it, and I stopped. Where you jot down your ideas and it creates connections for you. But this is the way our brain works. We do work with associations. We do work like that, and the problem is really putting everything together and reorganizing thematically. I said Facebook because a while ago I read that for many people, things that are written in Facebook style are easier to understand and retrieve than fiction.
What?
So with long-winded, yeah, I know.
Natives can do that.
What?
The technology, the technology natives. That's how
Yes.
they read now.
Digital natives, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it sounds strange. Yeah, but different people have.
But you can't
so you
find
would,
anything in there.
Okay,
I fall into Facebook and I can't get out for 3 hours. It's a morass of hibberty-gibberty.
So you would be the person who, when you look at the Talmud, you would say, okay, I have to cut all these things out and just give them the real material. You would be Rabbi Tzach Alfasi, who says, I cannot, right? Or like Rabbi Yudah Nasi,
crazy.
But you realize this is going back and forth. You have the Tanakh, which is pretty organized, but once you write commentary on it, you go on a tangent. So let's create the Mishnah. The Mishnah is pretty organized, but once you write commentary on it, it becomes the Talmud. It's all over the place. Let's write halachic monographs. Once you write that, like Rambam, and everybody writes commentary, then you have to reorganize the material again, and so on and so forth. So the problem is that at a certain point, you have to be able to say, I don't want to repeat the whole process. This is what Rambam tried to do, but it didn't work for him. And this, I think, the way that you should study and teach halakha. You have to really be able to identify the more important elements and use them. So let's say when you come to studying Midrash, you could do it as a purely theoretical, scientific task. I just want to cover this whole book from beginning to end with commentary, with explanation, with elucidation, which is nice. Or you say, okay, I want to use Midrash now for practical reasons. I need to achieve the ability to educate my children or my community or bring tikkun olam, and I'm going to use Midrashic sources. So you have to balance those things out. Okay, so we spoke about, I think, the most important compilations of Agadah. Now let's speak about the categories of Agadah. There are many attempts were done to categorize Agadah. I give you one article, which I think is a key article on that subject, and that's Joseph Heinemann, who was a scholar of Agadah. And even though you can break Agadah to many, many subcategories, he mentioned three major categories. So one of them, we could call it the exegetical Agadah. And this is commentary on the Torah. Now, for Agadah to be exegesis, or commentary, or hermeneutics, whatever you call it, it has to be text-based. And the flowchart that we're going to work on to determine which category this halakha this Agadah falls into, we'll work on that. This is the first thing. An exegetical Agadah has to have a foothold in the text. Like Karen mentioned yesterday in the famous statement, will be what bothered Rashi? Right? What bothered the commentator? Is he bothered by something in the text that bothers him? So you could look at many different midrashim and say, is there something here which is bothersome, or no? Is this, or in other words, is the difficulty intrinsic? Is it part of the text, or is it external? My knowledge of other events. Is this context or text? And so on. We have to. This is the process that we have to buy when we reach it. But a lot of the Agadah material revolves around biblical text, so you could call it commentary. But when you dig deeper, you have to ask how strongly is it attached to the text, and how did they get there? Right. Then the second one is biography, or is called the biographical Agadah, which describes the lives of people. So this is ambiguous in a way, because you say, what if the Agadah speaks about the life of Moshe? So is it biblical? Is it exegesis? Or is it biographical? So he assigned this label to post-biblical texts, which we have a lot of, the lives of important characters in the time of the Mishnah and the Talmud, the rabbis, the laymen, the Romans, the Greeks, the philosophers. We have a lot of protagonists in the Talmud.
And I'm sorry, it's Heinemann. What's the first name?
Joseph Heinemann. I think I sent you the article. So the biographical Agadah, and then the third category is, and those two are, a lot of this is in the Midrash Rabbah. A lot of this is in the Talmud, but you could find part of it everywhere. And then there's the one, it's called moral, ethical Agadah, that includes material that we wouldn't necessarily refer to as Agadah ourselves, as, for example, Masechet Avot. The teachings of the fathers is really Agadah.
Like Pirkei Avot.
Pirkei Avot, because it's not halakha, and it's not text-based. When they say, for example, Halomed Yered Lema Udumeh Lakotev Al Ni'ar Chadash, if you learn at a young age, is as if you write on new parchment. If you learn at an old age, it's as if you scratch the ink that was there, and now you write again, and it's not. It doesn't say well on the parchment. So there's no pasuk to back it up. So it's kind of a moral message. So these are the three main categories that he mentions. Other bring more categories, and definitely, but I think that in general you could put them all somehow under those major categories. And when we talk about genre, we said we have prose, there's poetry, there's liturgy, there are eulogies in the Midrash. You could find something almost of everything, but in broad lines, this is what we deal with.
Can I go back to Ein Yaakov for a second?
Yes.
Is there a definitive English translation that you suggest?
I think there is one.
For what?
Ein Yaakov?
Yeah, it's $100 and something. Yeah, I was looking at
No,
it.
I mean I know it exists. I mean I know there are them. I'm just
Sorry.
wondering which one.
I'm just like letting you know.
I just-
FYI. Just letting you know.
Did you spell it in English?
Yeah, so I did. And Yaakov, here we go. If you look, they have it on Amazon.
Yeah, I'm there.
So the ethical and inspirational teachings of the Talmud.
I see it was
Finkel.
I
Translation is the translation.
Finkel, yeah.
What did you say? The ethical?
yeah.
The inspirational teachings of the Talmud.
Mm-hmm. It says, it's but I don't know that this translation covers all of it.
Do they? I'm wondering if the English translation, because it's the Agadah of the Talmud.
Oh, here
So
it
do
is.
they have like the Talmud text and then?
Should have been easier just take it from the Talmud, and
Or then expound upon it,
Yeah.
or how do they actually do that?
so if he translate, I didn't look it up.
Because I've never
because
actually even heard of that, right?
Yeah,
The Agadah of the
I
Talmud.
personally, because I look at the Midrash from a different perspective, I go into the commentaries of the rabbinical world only when I feel it's really necessary. So I don't use the Ein Yaakov personally.
You can rent it.
It's like a movie. Hello.
No, probably on your Kindle.
She
You
doesn't
can
prove
rent
it.
it on your Kindle.
Oh, you can.
Yeah, it's like a textbook. But in any case, look it up. If he translated it with all the commentaries, then it's worth it. But I would say it's worth it only if you really want to do like a really serious research on Midrash only. Then you need all the volumes. If not, you could use it in the library.
So let me give you. I actually can't. No, they don't show it to me. Like
In this way, that would carry the same.
In the modern, you're asking if in the modern world you have,
Like post, what did we say?
not in the Orthodox world. In the non-Orthodox world, you have a book by Alan Frankel, Midrash Miriam. It's like the Midrashic women, or women who write Midrash. And you have a lot of works, even in the Orthodox world, or the modern Orthodox world, of works that are written in the style of Midrash, but none of them pretends to be of the same authority. You could say that Shai Agnon, if you're familiar with Hebrew literature, Shai Agnon, who won the Nobel Prize in literature, is a darshan. He's a major author of Midrash, because he was able to interweave into his works a lot of the rabbinic in his language is really rabbinic, amazing. If you know the Hebrew, he has an amazing mastery of the Hebrew language. Combine it with his social criticism and sarcasm and bitterness, and you get a nice Jewish book of Midrash. But no one calls it, Midrash Shai Agnon. Maybe in 1,000 years it will be. It takes the test of time. Okay, so I think with that we could, we'll do it maybe in another day. We'll talk about the techniques that the Midrash uses. I'll bring you examples of those techniques. But they're just like we speak in literature about lower criticism and higher criticism of seeing the full text and the storyline, which is higher criticism, and the lower criticism, which you look at words and letters and sentences. You have the same thing in Midrash, and it sometimes depends on the author, sometimes depends on the period. There are things that evolve. So you have anywhere from very sophisticated analysis of emotions and interactions and protagonists to word plays of making it into some kind of a word into an acronym, or taking a word and breaking it into two and making new words from it. So we have the full spectrum. But some of them, as the rabbis kept on using the tools of drasha, they perfected them. They created formulas where are really you could see that they took not just this word, but it's systematic. They could build a 2 and 3 stage drasha based on the same technique.
Can I ask just a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so when I asked the question yesterday, like how do I learn more about Midrash, like when this class is done? So I think what I meant is I will know as much about Midrash as you've taught me in 2 weeks.
Yes.
Right? And like random things that people quote in random sermons and books, right? From the course of my life.
Okay.
Right? That is my like familiarity with Midrash.
Mm-hmm.
So basically I'll know like this much. So like when I actually want to study Midrash again, you're saying buy the Sefer Haggadah in English and just like read it from cover to cover?
Oh no, so it depends on what you want to do. So what we're doing in this course, I'm highlighting topics in Haggadah,
Right.
like which I think are the most important. Meaning, what was the driving force behind the Haggadah, the agenda of the authors, the techniques that they used, and through this we are exposed to different works, different authors, and different methods. Now, once you finish that, of course, this is just the
that
tip
wasn't
of
meant
the.
as a criticism.
No, I know.
Okay.
No, not at all. I know it's like, okay, there's so much I want to know how to. So once you finish that, and this is the tip of the iceberg, you go on to decide what do I want to do with, or how am I going to use Midrash in my life.
I like the psychosocial stuff, and I would want to use it in sermons and stuff.
So you, for example, you're going to look at the biblical narrative that you like.
And also the technique. Like, I want to be able to do what these people
Okay,
are
so
doing.
you'll have to read the fiction in terms of you read the fiction of the Tanakh, the narrative. So what is the story? What is the you could either start with the message or you could start with the story.
Mm-hmm.
What is if it's the story that you want to work
I
on?
usually start with the idea that I want to get across. I mean,
The
if I'm
idea.
writing a sermon, it's like, okay, well, I see in my community that this is the issues that we're dealing with, and like, where is it in the text? And then I'm
Right.
like, oh, well, there's that, so I can use
So
that.
right, so to do that, could use Sefer Haggadah, because Sefer Haggadah, like I said, is thematic. So if it's a question, for example, of patience, then you will find a category in Sefer Haggadah, patience, and then you could find stories related to
Yeah,
it.
that's just a good one for me personally.
Yeah. So it will work for you.
No, I have no patience, so that'd be great. I'd be like,
Okay.
some self-study
I just like, okay,
and
yeah.
self,
No, it could be.
reflection.
I'm like patience, wealth, poverty, faith, etc. All these things.
You hit this.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
For me personally.
Okay. So that would be a good place to look.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yes. For that purpose, Sefer Haggadah will be perfect. Like anything else, sometimes we're frustrated because there's so much. When you start, just opening the Jewish bookcase, there's so many things that
Topple,
So you have. Unfortunately, we have to choose. We have to be selective. Like there was a period that I said, I need to read this like mystical literature from a psychological point of view, like of Cordovero or by Cordovero, and see how he deals with issues of gender and issues of communication. Also,
It's like a life work.
yeah. So it's waiting. What can I do? But to me, Tanakh, even when you want to do Midrash, the number one source for any Midrash or anything like that is Tanakh. You have to read the Tanakh cover to cover. At the second time around, you could skip all the technical stuff, like the building of the tabernacle and the sizes of the blemishes and the number of the sacrifices. Skip that. Stick to the narrative of the Torah, the narrative of scriptures and the wisdom literature, Proverbs, Kohelet, Tehillim, and the scrolls, and do this exercise, really reading it without commentators, and a lot of material comes through. And then when you take it to the next step and say, okay, I want to see what the commentators write on this. Take the Akedah, for example, and look at the different commentators on the Akedah, or different Midrashim. Then you'll find interesting material. So you could always start, even if you're not clear on the message, you could look at the biblical story that is close to it, and then you'll know where to look for in the Midrash. Yeah. Sefer Haggadah Legends of the Jews is, like you said, I think I read it maybe once or twice in its entirety when I was a teenager.
Impressive. Okay.
Yeah, it was like Lord of the Rings.
I read those in high school.
Yeah, if I could do Lord of the Rings, then I could do that, But then I went back only when I had, some issues that I wanted to figure out. Though this is what it would be, and I want to expose through those next units to see really how the rabbis did exactly that, because they had the same problem. They wanted to keep the people on one hand entertained and interested, right? I want you to come to my synagogue or to come to any synagogue. It all depends, if you have a movement or not. Seriously, this is how rabbis and congregations work today. There's some movements that work. They would be able to work as a teamwork. I don't mind. I don't care which synagogue you go to, as long as it's one of the as an affiliated one, and some which are more territorial. So some rabbis are concerned about that. Other are concerned just really about the welfare of the people, their spiritual welfare. I need them to come to the synagogue, and they see the drasha just as a tool to keep them there. And then the more you advance on that ladder, it will be those who really want to use the Midrash in order to bring peace and harmony and quality of life to those people. Like the Midrash that was so annoying of Esther marrying Mordechai, but when we understand it was done in order to save grace for those poor women, then it's a completely different story. So this is also how you approach that. Let's take a break.